Working as a pumping parent is so vulnerable on so many aspects that when your employer is able to meet you at your most vulnerable and make sure that you have everything you need, I mean, you're going to be the best employee ever. There's just something that unlocks in you.
LL Bean is a privately owned Maine icon of a brand that's headquartered in Freeport, Maine, and we have facilities in Freeport as well as across the country where our employees work. We're a purpose-driven company, so everything is about inspiring and enabling people to enjoy the restorative power of the outdoors. The policies related to lactation have been mostly driven by new legislation, meaning finding creative ways to create private space so that they can achieve their pumping goals while also achieving their work goals.
I have 2 children, 2 toddlers, and when I started my role at LL Bean last year, my little one was only a few months old, so I was still breastfeeding, and it was definitely a little daunting to start a new position and also need pumping breaks here and there. And I remember having to send that first email before my very first day and asking if there were any breastfeeding rooms and accommodations. I was really surprised that it almost sounded like I asked for something that was already there, and I wasn't making an outlandish ask.
Some of the biggest challenges for new moms going back to work are that they might not have a space they can pump in because they work in a small environment with very little extra office space. There are creative strategies that employers can come up with their employees to make sure that there is privacy and that privacy isn't in a bathroom. Another challenge for new moms is finding the time to express their milk. They might have a super busy day ahead of them, and if they aren't supported in taking that time, then they might miss their pumping break and they might experience engorgement or mastitis ultimately, and that is not a health condition that anyone wants to experience.
I would always just focus on pumping. I never had to do anything else during my pumping time, and I actually guard that very, very closely.
Both my children were born while I worked here. So my older daughter is 4 now, so she was born February 29th, leap day 2020. And I was on maternity leave when we went home to remote work during the pandemic. I would pump while I was listening in on meetings. I would pump while returning emails. I would pump sort of while trying to multitask. And I found really quickly that my milk supply just dropped precipitously. And I stopped trying after about 2 weeks. A lot of the people I worked with were saying things like, hey, make sure you take enough time and make sure that you give yourself sort of the space. And I didn't listen to them enough. And so I now, when other people are starting this journey, I always advise them, pumping is not a neutral activity. Like, make sure that you're in the right head and emotional space to do it.
If you're somebody who needs to pump milk and that's a common break that is already being paid because of the Fair Labor Standards Act and it's 15 minutes twice a day or something, then you're going to be able to be paid to use that time to express milk. But if you are requesting time above that, or the employer doesn't give those breaks, then the employer is allowed to give you unpaid break time to do the expressing of the milk, only as long as you as the employee are completely relieved of all your duties. If you're doing any kind of work for the employer during that break and you're a non-exempt employee, then you would need to be paid for that time.
In speaking with our HR team, it's been really heartening to understand how they are looking across the diverse employee base and understanding not only what do HQ employees have access to in our amazing mother's rooms, but also how do you make that work in a regional retail store or in an operational environment where we have to be a little bit more careful about how we use space. My approach going into conversations with employees who were trying to pump at work was always, tell me what I need to know. It comes down to a one-on-one conversation of what do you need?
I think that LL Bean has both the means and the desire to make sure that breastfeeding parents have a good experience breastfeeding at work or pumping at work, and having both the means and the desire is the secret sauce to have it be perfect, but sometimes just having the desire may be what is needed to at least activate the processes that you need to put in place to get also the means.